Hi spooky friends, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you're not new. Today I am bringing you another horror based video. So a little bit of background. I've been exploring more classical horror stories over the last couple of years. I read a lot of the classic horror stories that center around religion, which then formed the Exorcist effect, and I will leave that video down below so you can go check that out, because I do deep dive into the world of religion and its connotations in horror. And in that video I talked about The Exorcist, The Omen, and Rosemary's Baby. Those are three foundational texts for the religious horror genre that we see today in books and in movies. Reading foundational horror texts has been key for me in the last couple of years to really understand where this genre started and to gain knowledge in each of the subsections. So I've delved into wishes and like grief areas, and then also within religion. So those are two subgenres that I have deep dived into their backstories and can kind of see where modern stories stem from. And so you'll see by this video title that I'm going to be reading the oldest horror book in existence. The oldest horror book is centered around the Gothic style. So this story is considered the first ever Gothic horror story. And if you've been around my channel long enough, you'll know a lot of my favorite stories are Gothic in style. So of course I did have to delve deeper and put some context into those books that I think are incredible reads. So you have the likes of Woman in Black, which is very Gothic, centered around grief, but really dark and creepy. Then we also have A Hunting in the Arctic, which is a more modern story that has really strong Gothic vibes. All of these stories that we read in today's world around the Gothic style stem from this beginning. So I'm so excited to delve into this book, and the book in question is The Castle of Otranto. So I'm going to read a little bit of the foreword in this book because it gives a little bit of context as to where the story started. There's a lot of mystery around this story, so I think that that's what makes it intriguing. It's a novel that was first published in 1764, and it's generally regarded as the first Gothic novel. In the first edition, the word Gothic wasn't in the story title. He added that in the second edition. So when it was republished, he added a Gothic story into that. And so in his second edition, he wanted to blend the two kinds of romance, the ancient and the modern being in the 1700s. This work was found originally in the library of an ancient Catholic family in the north of England. So for ages, this story went unnoticed, and it was determined that the year in question was 1529. The story was originally printed in 1529, but the story could have been written years before that. So we don't actually know how much sooner that it was written. So that's like, there's a mystery around that, and it's very interesting to delve deeper into. I don't actually know too much about what the story is, simply because I do want to go in slightly blind, and then I can kind of tell you a little bit more about the story when I'm a little bit into it. So I will probably read one or two chapters and then come back and kind of give you a roundup of the story so far, what I think, and what it's like, if it's a good book to pick up. I know that not everybody will enjoy these really old stories, especially as if this is written in 1095. This is the oldest book that I've ever read. So I'm really looking forward to delving into it and telling you all about it. And my bookmark just fell out. So I haven't started it. I literally just put the bookmark in where chapter 1 starts. But yeah, I'm going to read some of that now and come back and tell you what I think. So I've now finished chapter 1 of the Castle of Otranto, and we are quickly introduced to a lot of the themes that we are going to be exploring in the rest of the story. The novel starts with the preparations for Manfred's son's wedding. Manfred is the Prince of Otranto, and his son Conrad is marrying Princess Isabella. And of course, the wedding is necessary to continue the bloodline of this family. And something, I'm going to put the book down because my bookmark is going to fall out again. So I'm going to put it down. And I wrote some notes. So we are introduced to the prophecy literally right in the beginning. And this wedding is necessary to continue that bloodline. Because there is an ancient prophecy that states the castle and lordship of Otranto should pass from the present family whenever the real owner should be grown too large to inhabit it. So that's the main prophecy, and it's told to us right in the beginning. And it showcases how necessary this is to continue the long life of this family reign. But unfortunately, right before the wedding, tragedy strikes and Conrad is dead. He is killed by getting struck in the head by a giant helmet that mysteriously falls from the sky. So naturally, this is sending shockwaves and panic in the family, especially with Manfred. And he becomes obsessed with preventing this prophecy from coming true. In this panicked moment, he says that he will divorce his wife and marry Isabella to then continue his bloodline. So Isabella is like horrified by this proposal. She does not want to be then like married to her was to be husband's dad. So she kind of flees into the dark castle and kind of seeks shelter away from this crazed man who wants to have kids with her. And so when she is fleeing and exploring like the dark side of the castle, she can't leave because all of the gates are locked, so she has to seek shelter somewhere else. But in this, she kind of encounters supernatural elements, and this is where the spooky gothic themes are introduced, and we kind of start to see that Theodore, the man who's accused of Conrad's death, becomes a important figure in the development of this chapter and possibly in later parts of this story. So like I said, themes that we are exploring center around prophecy. That's like the main theme that has come out of the first chapter, and we see the helmet that killed Conrad set tensions between like humans and destiny. And then also we're seeing a lot more themes of power and ambition with Manfred's psychotic tries to not make this prophecy come true, and he's obsessing about maintaining his family's power and legacy. And I think this is going to be symbolic of how power can corrupt people, and it's making Manfred kind of consider his marriage and loyalty and his morality. So I think this prophecy and the continuation of his power and his family's legacy is going to really show in the rest of this story. And of course, being a gothic tale, we are exploring supernatural versus reality. That has really stuck out as well in the first chapter. This is shown in the fact that a giant helmet, which is probably supernatural, killed his son. And we're also delving into the dark, atmospheric, and eerie castle. These are themes that are really central in the Gothic literature that we are seeing in more modern terms. So it's interesting to see that this is where it starts, and it creates that sense of fear and uncertainty with what's to come. So seeing that in the first chapter and how this is going to develop in the rest of the story is really interesting, because we see that in a lot of more modern stories, how the supernatural versus natural is creating a sense of fear and unknown, So it's really interesting to see where it started. And so we're also seeing the theme of gender and the patriarchy. At the time, obviously, women didn't have agency over themselves. They are just objects for men to own. And we see this with Manfred trying to marry his son's ex-fiance. She is obviously terrified of this, does not want it to happen, so she is fleeing in order to not be caught up in this endeavor, essentially. And this is symbolic of what women went through for a really long time. Obviously some people still do, but yeah, there is no sense of female agency, and women are there for the men, and it is obviously very obvious within this first chapter that that's the case, and we're going to see more of that throughout this story. It's something that I do understand is going to be present in these books, because obviously at the time that they were written, the time was really different and women had no rights. So at the end of the day, that is going to be a theme that we see, and I just thought I would throw it in there and mention it, because some people won't enjoy those storylines and actually would hate to read those, but if you're reading old stories, I feel like that is something that you're not going to get away from. Overall, this first chapter sets up the story in such an incredible way. It really does lean into the gothic nature of fear and the unknown, and it is such a moody first chapter. We are seeing Manfred as this crazed man who is overcome with grief because he's lost his son, that he is now terrified that this prophecy is going to become true. And it's really interesting to see that dynamic set up for the rest of the story. I'm now really intrigued to read some more and see how this develops and delve deeper into these themes and the prophecy, and to see what really comes out of this. Now on chapter 2, so I'm really intrigued to see how this one develops. I'm probably not going to check in until maybe halfway through or near the end of the story, because I don't feel like a check-in after each chapter is going to make sense, because it's probably just going to be the same themes that we're exploring. So I might do a roundup at the end of the book, just so you can kind of see what is the outcome of this book. But currently it's very interesting, setting up to be very eerie and moody, so I'm intrigued to see where it goes. I guess if you are enjoying it, do let me know in the comments if you plan to check this one out. It is really short. You could probably read this in like 3 to 4 hours. It's, if you're not too put off by old language, but it is intriguing. And if you have read it, do let me know in the comments what you thought of it. I would really love to hear your thoughts and opinions, and if you've picked out the same themes as me, it would be really interesting to talk to you about it. But I'm going to go and read some more, and then I will check back in when I have an update. So a few hours later, and I have finished the Castle of Otranto. I read this in like 2 hours, so it is a super quick book to read, and there is an audiobook, so that does help you to get through it quicker. It does say on the audiobook that it should take you around 4 hours, but I read it in like 2.5. I really enjoyed reading this book and delving into the start of the Gothic stories. So where we stopped in chapter 1, my last update to you, we saw Manfred kind of obsessively trying to save his family's right to power and to run Otranto. So he is desperately trying to find Isabella to marry his son's wife. Well, was supposed to be wife. Anyway, and we started to meet Theodore, who was a mysterious peasant. So I knew that he was going to have more than just being a peasant to him. So after the first chapter, the story unfolds from there. We kind of continue following Manfred, his desires, and this whole crusade of trying to ensure that his bloodline remains. But as that unfolds, the secrets of the castle and who the true heir is unfolded, and how Manfred is reacting, and how Manfred's cruel ambition really is the cause of his downfall. And so, in a tragic twist of fate, he ends up killing his own daughter, thinking that it was someone else, trying to stop Theodore from pursuing his rightful place to the throne, essentially. So Manfred kind of goes off the rails, kills his daughter on accident, and he's really at a point where it's too late to change how he is. And I think that the book kind of symbolizes that his thirst for power was the reason for his family's downfall. And so in the end, Theodore is revealed to be the true heir of Otranto, and the ancient prophecy that Manfred was so afraid of happening has been fulfilled. And so, with that ancient prophecy being fulfilled, Manfred ends up losing everything he has: his family, his throne, Otranto, and his castle. And we finish this story with a warning about unchecked ambitions and how you can escape your own fate that is set in stone, and this is like embodiment of that. So the themes that I mentioned in the beginning, that were introduced right in chapter 1, we see continuing throughout this book, and a really strong thread is the supernatural. Gothic stories, especially this where it began, are centered around the fear of the unknown, that supernatural element in this story around giant helmets, giant hands, the ghostly figures, and just the fear that people have is really symbolic of the symbol of fate. Like, you cannot control fate. And that's where the strong thread of supernatural theming is in this story. But we also see corruption of power. Manfred is obviously in a position of power, and he is using that, and it is corrupting him and his mind, and he has uncontrolled desires and ambition in order to maintain his level of control. And we see Manfred decay in a way. His mind, he starts to go mad, his morality is questioned, and that's a really strong theme within Gothic horror stories. And picking it out in this first piece of fiction, I can see where Edgar Allan Poe got some inspiration for his Gothic work, where the descent into madness is so prominent in his stories. And we can see that ambition really turns to ruin. We also have themes of the patriarchy in here, and then fighting gender roles, essentially. So, as I said in the beginning, this book was written at a time where women did not have any rights, and we were really stuck in the patriarchy. And with Isabella's flight from Manfred's advances towards her, she is kind of fighting the patriarchy in a way. It's highlighting the theme of male dominance, which is so prevalent in this kind of era of society. And also that is often used within Gothic tales which follow this in the early 18th and 19th century. So it is a really strong theme that we often see, and it was interesting to kind of understand it in this story as well. So it was really interesting to see Isabella's kind of fight against this man's control. She is the symbolism of female resistance. That's kind of like her challenging the patriarchal society. So it was very intriguing to kind of read that in this story, and also how the other characters react and how other women are saying like she has to stop, she has to listen to what she is being told to do. And that was just so strong in these days in this society. And also we can see where other Gothic stories have kind of stemmed from this. And finally, I think the really strong theme of all Gothic stories, and especially within this first piece of work, is the sense of fear. So we can see that that sense of fear is so strong in horror, is the fear of the unknown, things that we cannot see, things that we do not understand. And much of this story is centered around the fear of the unknown, the kind of ghostly figures, the dark and eerie castle. It's very strong and prevalent in this story, and it's also what we see in a lot of other modern day horror, and especially within the works that came after this. So, like I said, within Edgar Allan Poe's work, and then also up to modern classics in Shirley Jackson's writings too. So I'm putting the book down for now because I think that is everything that I really wanted to delve into. And so I kind of wanted to just round out that this story has proven itself to be the start of the Gothic genre, essentially. The creepy atmosphere, the supernatural dread, and the psychological complexities that we see in this story is now transferred within modern horror as well. So to see where all of that stems from in the Castle of Otranto, I really have enjoyed kind of understanding the themes and placing modern day horror back into where it first originated. So it was really interesting to read this story. Its themes of fate, power, fear, and supernatural we can still see in today's world. It's definitely not gone unnoticed, and we can see that there's a lot of inspiration taken from this first origin, and how everything goes back to fate. And these themes still haunt our modern day horror pages and screens. So yeah, I have really enjoyed reading this and diving into the world of Gothic literature from way back when. It's a very old story, and the writing is kind of difficult, but it's not too difficult. I've read stories that were a lot more difficult to understand. So if you do kind of struggle with older texts, I think that this one shouldn't be too bad, because the difficulty has been in the dialogue sections rather than the actual narration. I really enjoyed reading this, and it's another tick for the classics. Do let me know if you've read this, if these themes are something that you picked out as well. Can you see any horror stories that take inspiration from the Castle of Otranto? Do let me know. I do have some that come to mind. I did mention a few authors there do take inspiration from this story. But if you have any other ideas, do drop them in the comments below as well. And I am so glad that you've watched it this far. If you enjoyed this content, do stick around. I would love to have you here. Do like and subscribe, because I create a lot of videos around the macabre, and it would be really good to have you. So with that, I am going to round out this video. And until next time, keep your pages turning and embrace the darkness. Bye!